Hi, Stefanos, can you hear me?
Yes, Savas, I can hear you.
Excellent. Okay, let's give a few minutes for everyone to be able to register in, and then we can start.
Okay.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending today's webinar. Before we progress with the most important aspects of today's webinar, please allow me to first mention some boring details like disclaimers. By attending the webinar, you are entering an area where photography, video recording, and audio recordings occur. Michael Kyprianou & Co. LLC reserves the right to use any photograph, video, or audio taken at the event without express written permissions of those included with the photograph, video, or audio recording. Images and audio will not be identified using full names or personal identifying information without approval from the subject of such images or audio. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. And a personal disclaimer here, I'm doing this webinar from home, so if you hear any kids shouting and screaming, excuse us, that's our normal life these days. These are challenging times for everyone. We know that under current circumstances, there are more important issues than property values. Your welfare and that of your family, friends, and wider community must take priority. But we are still here, and we need to plan our future. This war will end. It's just a phase in our life circle. Pandemics have always shaped economies and countries, including the values of properties. Does the coronavirus pandemic create uncertain climate in Cyprus real estate? Where will we be in 6 months and a year from today? While office doors remain closed, with all of you here today, we remain proactive. Let us today investigate tomorrow and what we should expect. Please interact, submit your questions, and I will try to respond to all of them on this webinar. During the presentations, I will be focused on the presentations. However, I will take a peek at them periodically and then answer them during our Q&A stage. If I do not get all of you, then I will personally email you after the webinar to get an answer to you, as we have limited time. Stefanos, welcome and thank you for being with us today. I heard that recently you become a father. Just correct me. I heard that recently you become a father again. Is that correct?
Exactly, for the second time.
For the second time. Congratulations to you and your wife then.
Thank you very much.
Stefane, as a lawyer, I know that in Cyprus, the property valuations profession is regulated by the Cyprus Scientific and Technical Chamber Law number 224 of 1990. And even though specific procedural standards and methodologies are not in place, it is widely recognized and accepted that the risk valuations, professional standards, the red book as you call it, must be adopted when undertaking written valuations. For the purposes of transparency and for us to be able to better understand, can you please briefly explain to us the guidelines you and members of your professions are following providing valuations in the Cypriot market? In addition, if you allow me, Is there any guidance or instructions as to how to handle the uncertainty that currently we're facing?
Okay, first I would like to thank you as well for inviting me on this webinar. Dear all, I hope this webinar finds you and your families safe and in good health. Okay, now moving on to your question. Yes, on the first part of your question, I would agree that yes, the exact legislation regulates the profession of valuer in Cyprus. Although there are no specific guidelines or professional standards issued from EDEC, which is the Cyprus Scientific and Technical Chamber, the most common standards adopted in Cyprus are the RICS standards, which, by the way, fully incorporate the IVS, which are the International Valuation Standards. Okay. I will very briefly tell you that RICS standards through the Red Book have 5 mandatory valuation technical and performance standards. The VPS1 refers to the terms of engagement. The VPS2 refers to the inspections, investigations, and records. The VPS3 refers to the valuation reports themselves. The VPS4 refers to the basis of value assumptions and special assumptions. And VPS5 refers to the valuation approaches and methodologies. Okay, so now regarding the second part of your question, which concerns the uncertainty prevailing in the market as a result of the recent COVID-19 outbreak, the International Valuation Standards Council, through a letter, addresses the issues that might arise due to the recent COVID-19 outbreak. Namely, they refer to the requirement for disclosure of significant uncertainty or limited conditions that might affect valuation. They also refer to the valuation uncertainty, which should be not confused with the market risk. In order to understand, valuation uncertainty is caused by mainly three reasons. A, when there is a market disruption at the valuation date, i.e. where the inputs available for valuation relate to the market before the event. B, it refers to the input availability, where there is a lack of relevant input data. And C refers to the choice of method, where different methodologies produce different outcomes. The choice of the right method may be a source of valuation uncertainty. It is noted that there is a requirement to disclose uncertainty only when it is significant. In case of significant uncertainty, all assumptions within the valuation approach and methodology should be disclosed within the valuation report. In addition, the IVS Council issued additional advice to the valuers, which have been advised to clearly state when a physical inspection is not possible, or it is possible only to inspect externally a property. The valuers have also been advised to decline instructions when they feel that the valuation is carried out on a restricted basis, and this is not possible. Finally, they were advised not to rely on pre-crisis criteria for their valuations, as this assumes that values will return to their pre-crisis levels, which might not be correct. The RICS has also published a guidance concerning the impact of COVID-19 on valuation through a valuation practice alert. Again, the RICS, which adopts the IVS, which are the International Valuation Standards, is in line with their guidance. In addition, the RICS emphasizes the related health and safety issues when visiting a site for valuation, and that in the absence of on-site inspection, the valuer must make sure to have access to enough information. Reference is also made to the issue of valuation uncertainty and COVID in the RICS alert, and COVID-19 is characterized as a natural event. They have come up with a proposed wording to valuers in order to report material valuation uncertainty. In addition, reference is also made to the assumptions and special assumptions that may need to be made, and it is noted that in some cases, special assumptions are asked to be made and are not realistic, should be declined by the valuer.
Right. Very good. Let me ask you one major question. The impact of COVID-19 on the real estate market. Can you please explain us how the market has been affected?
Okay, before I engage in answering directly that question, I believe it's wise to describe a little bit the general economic scenery. Although what we are currently experiencing might be characterized as uncharted waters, it nevertheless seems that the Cyprus economy is running on fumes. As we all know, all non-essential businesses have been shut down and most of us are forced to literally stay home. A series of measures have been already taken by the government, mainly aiming to increase market liquidity for the next few months. The package for supporting the economy to avoid sacking and reduction of salaries has a cost of circa 1.3 billion euros. The government has already issued as well government bonds of circa 1.75 billion euros for that purpose. But my belief is that, and the Minister of Finance belief is also as well, that all the tools provided at European level should also be utilized. In addition, the issue of the government issuing the state guarantees of up to 2 billion euros in bank loans is still pending. As the Minister of Finance recently stated, in case the package of support needs to be extended further than the 12th of June, then we'll have a problem and there should be some cost cutting. Assuming COVID-19 infections are limited, the government officials estimate that in May, there will be a gradual restart of the basic sectors of the economy, and hence additional cost-cutting measures might be avoided. It is worth mentioning that government officials estimate that the economy could shrink by 9% of GDP this year, and the IMF estimates that the figure will be circa 6.5%. Now, moving on to the implications on the real estate market, the impact of COVID-19 virus is already felt both in businesses and living. The implications for each sector most probably will be different, but are difficult to predict. So what we will do is focus on the immediate impacts. So, referring to the hotel sector, travel restrictions in most countries are prohibiting travel, and all hotels in Cyprus currently are closed with a relevant government order. The magnitude of the impact is unknown and will depend on the duration and the extent of the outbreak. Although, as per the relevant projections of Mr. Perdios, tourism is expected to fall by 60% at best this year, nevertheless, to mitigate the damage, emphasis should be given on winter tourism, local tourism, and specialized tourism. It should be noted that there is always the risk that the return to normal is protracted. Right. Hotels will most probably lose the season this year and have reduced revenues next year. So, now moving on to the retail market. Again, here the travel restrictions and closure of most non-essential businesses, as well as restrictions to movement, are greatly affecting consumer demand. Non-essential goods items will most probably be hit harder, and if the outbreak insists, this might lead to lower inventory levels and hence higher consumer prices. It must be noted that if the virus slows down by May as expected, the end of year sale period will not be greatly affected and may mitigate damages. What is crucial for our retailers is to protect their cash flow, and in doing so, they might ask for a discount in rent or not paying rent at all. Although in Cyprus there are some thoughts of regulating this issue, it is said that intervening in private agreements might be judged non-constitutional. There are thoughts, though, of imposing rent reductions with indirect benefits to the owners through tax reliefs.
Right.
We're already seeing a turn to online shopping, and hence retailers with that ability will benefit against others. In addition, the restrictions or delays of delivery of goods cross-border might lead to retailers to stock more locally and hence increase the demand for storage space locally. Now moving on the industrial and logistics market, the distribution to global supply chains is significantly impacting on the industrial and logistics sector on the short term. In the longer term, this outbreak might accelerate the use of automation and robots in operations, hence reducing necessary space. On the other hand, the turn towards online shopping, especially for groceries, may boost demand for logistics space. Okay, now moving on to the office market. COVID-19 is causing office utilization rates to fall as working from home increases, and in some cases with good results, apparently. This is most probably the largest test of working from home in history, and companies are still testing policies and infrastructure for best results. In the medium term, it is believed that working from home will be promoted, and there might be some decrease in demand for office space. Now, finally, the residential sector. The outbreak of COVID-19 inevitably affects the way we live and play, even the way we style our hair, i.e. myself. As far as residential sector is concerned, it is believed that both demand from locals and foreigners will be affected, although foreign demand at much greater extent, and hence the residential units in big projects like marinas, casinos, and generally residential units addressed to foreigners will be hit most. Measures that the government has taken to limit unemployment and increase liquidity in the market might improve the picture as far as local demand is considered. So, although the direct real estate impact of COVID-19 is visible, nevertheless, its indirect effects have not been felt and are difficult to predict. Most probably, the impact and aftermath of COVID-19 will change the way we live and work in the long run. But will working from home become the new trend? Will online shopping and especially grocery become the norm? Will the integration of technology in all aspects of life and business be enhanced? All the above questions cannot be currently answered, but all may have an impact on real estate. So the key is to monitor the situation frequently and invest in the right infrastructure and take new measures and policies to mitigate the risk. Now, on a relevant note, as far as real estate transactions are concerned, the official data issued by the Land Registry very recently showed that the transactions in May 2020 have been reduced by 33% in comparison to March 2019. We believe that although the above figures include the partial lockdown of the 2 weeks of March 2020, the transactions of April 2020 will provide a clearer indication, as many transactions in March 2020 either did not take into consideration the COVID-19 impact or were agreements preceding the events. In addition, as per the SciStat publications, the prices of residential units in the fourth quarter of 2019 have been reduced by 3.7% in relation to the prices of the third quarter of 2019. What we are currently experiencing is a frozen market with nearly no transactions. Hence, the major way to assess the value is by making assumptions of the net present value of the future cash flows, which will be shaped by the future dynamics of the supply and demand.
Right. Yeah, very good. Stefane, comparing this crisis, this economic crisis, with the economic crisis in 2008, what is the difference pertaining to the real estate sector?
Okay. The main difference between the two is their origin. In 2008, the crisis came within the system itself. And now, contrary to 2008, it was from an external shock caused by the pandemic. It may also be noted that even though the current crisis is not financial by origin, it might become one if the banks are left to feel the final impact of the shock.
Right.
In addition, in 2008, the effect on demand for real estate was indirect, i.e. the investors had insufficient funds or no access to financing. Now it is direct, i.e. from restrictions to travel, movement, closed borders, etc.
Okay. What should investors in the real estate industry do during these times to benefit possibly or minimize their losses?
Okay, it's a two-tier question. The first part, I will say that investors should maintain liquidity and not rush to transactions, as prices may continue to adjust until 2021. Needless to say that in the meantime, they could chase on bargains through relevant professionals. So yes, there is always room for transactions.
So you're telling us to be patient then for the time being?
Yes, I would say. Concerning the second part of your question, landlords should be flexible in negotiations with their tenants in order to keep them so their cash flows are not greatly affected. They should also try to cut on operating costs of their real estate and repair unnecessary maintenance costs.
Right. Okay, that's a good piece of advice. Okay, you mentioned previously about rents and being affected, and you make a distinctions between commercial premises mostly being affected. Let's say that if the new trend now is to be working from home, do you believe that the residential properties equally will be affected by the pandemic?
Look, rents, both residential and commercial, are and will take a hit. I believe that commercial rents will be hit more though, as most non-essential businesses are closed. Landlords will be willing to accept reductions in order not to lose a good tenant. On the other hand, residential rents, especially addressed to locals, will be hit less as long as the households have cash and unemployment remains low, which are the target of the government through the package of measures.
Yeah. Okay. Also, as you mentioned previously again, you said that tourism industry basically is being affected the most at the moment, and we feel that due to the restrictions of traveling and all this. Considering that tourism industry is being affected, short-term renters are also being considerably affected. What will be your advice to property owners? Should they change over to long-term rents? How can they estimate the rent that they can claim if they switch off to the long-term rents? What is your opinion on that?
Yes, look, of course, I will advise the owners to try and shift from long-term rentals, if that is possible. I mean, market their property on a long-term basis, at least I will say 1-2 year contracts, but I would say that they will have to have a relevant break clause in there in case the market shifts soon back again.
Right.
In order to estimate the rent, they should ask for professional advice for evaluation, which most probably will be based on comparable rents, which will take into consideration the present crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Needless to say, though, that if all landlords or owners place their assets in the market as for long-term rentals, that will increase supply of properties for rent as on a long-term basis in the market, and that might put a pressure on rents.
Right. Yes.
So it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. Let's turn a little bit the questions for sites that are under construction, sites that are not completed yet. Do you believe that the value of those sites are also being affected by the pandemic? Is something going to change in relation with these properties? And what would be your advice in relation with these uncompleted properties at the moment?
Look, I would first of all, I would say that most probably you are referring to the multi-story skyscrapers that are currently under construction. My belief is that for such a building to be already in the pipeline, the construction works have commenced, most probably more than 30% of the units have been sold. Taking that into consideration, though, even the 60 or 70% of the units which are unsold, or even the 50% of the units which are unsold, is still a big number, which if pressure comes on the owners, they will have to put these units, maybe not at the same time in the market, but in a short period of time. In addition, taking into consideration that these kind of units are frequent in coastal cities like Limassol, Paphos, Amohostos, Larnaca, and they concern units which were mainly addressed to foreigners. Take into consideration that the demand from foreigners has been hit since May, approximately 2019, and is now even taking a greater hit due to the outbreak of the coronavirus. I will expect some reduction in prices.
Right.
Of course, the reduction will be determined on how big the hit will be, which nobody knows exactly at the moment, how long the economies will be closed, and how long the economies will take to recover.
Right. Okay. Yeah, definitely is an answer. It's a question that we cannot give a definitely answer.
No. It's rational that they will take a hit. But if it's going to be 5, 10, or 30, nobody knows.
We don't
have to see. I mean, the outbreak is quite recent. And effectively, the strict measures that have been imposed throughout the world is like 3 weeks, maximum 1 month old.
Right.
We have no evidence. We have not enough sample of transactions to draw results at this moment.
Okay.
Neither we know what the future will be. It will all depend on the extent that this outbreak will have.
Yeah. In relations to that, I'm just trying to pick up some questions from the participants here, Stefane. In relations with that last point, there is one question here. Which says that the Cyprus property market depends mainly on foreign investments. How can we manage to attract these foreign investments in Cyprus after the pandemic? Is there any plan in mind? In relation with that, I want to mention that today I was reading a very interesting article in Philadelphia's newspaper, which was quite positive, I would say. Basically, the article was referring to the naturalizations of citizens to be used as an effort to secure liquidity by the state. And as according to basic and extreme scenarios prepared by the Ministry of Finance, 3.6 billion and 5 billion respectively will be needed in order to address the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. According to the article on Φιλελεύθερος News, after Easter, the regulations are expected to be submitted to the House of Parliament, on the basis of which the terms and conditions for honorary naturalization for reasons of public interest and the naturalizations of foreign businessmen and investors will be relaxed. The draft regulations went through the scrutiny of the three-member ad hoc committee responsible for the control of naturalizations, which has submitted its recommendations. The regulations will set out in a transparent manner the conditions for granting citizenship to investors. It's worth noting that after the adoption of the regulations, the procedure for approving the hundreds of applications from foreign investors which are pending will be accelerated. So far, 100 applications have been approved and more than 700 applications are in queue. The parties estimate that using naturalizations after the required checks have been carried out will result in some 1 billion in revenues into the state coffers, money that will partially compensate for the loss of state revenue. It's worth mentioning that naturalizations will also contribute to the revival of the construction sector, which is facing many problems due to the restrictive measures imposed. So at least we have some positive news, according always to Φιλελεύθερος newspaper today. So hopefully things will get there and things will get better.
Yeah, just to add something, yes, I agree that these foreign income money injections into our economy through the mutualization scheme will for sure help Cyprus economy recovery. What is important is to keep track on a daily basis of the changes of the outbreak in the several countries of the world, and accordingly adjust our plans to draw investors from countries which have succeeded in containing the outbreak, which I'm sure the government officials are already doing that.
Right, yes, yeah. Just picking another question here. Cyprus companies and procedures for opening bank accounts. The Cyprus government should be less strict on the company opening procedures in order to help the economy. Okay, interesting question related with the economy and is reflecting as well on the properties value as well. Because the more relaxations they are on new entities to be established in Cyprus and open bank accounts, definitely more money will come into the country. I have to say that the Cyprus banking system has undergone various changes for the better in the last few years. Improvement, upgrading was one of the National Bank's most important goals, which is this is the reason that it's possible now these days to start the procedure of opening a bank account online. Consequently, this means that foreign citizens and investors interested in setting up business in Cyprus can commence the bank opening procedures before arriving in the country. This is an important advantage, and we need to mention that in comparison to many other European countries in which the procedure is longer and foreign citizens need to be in the country during the entire process. Also, I need to mention that approval of the 9-month freezing loan law on loan installment is another immediate step that the government of Cyprus has taken related to the banking sector, which demonstrates the government's readiness in maintaining the best interests of its residents and investors. I'm quite confident that the government of Cyprus will consider all issues which are related to the opening of bank accounts and especially during these very difficult times. So let's think positively. Let me just see what other questions.
In addition, Savas, to the opening of the bank accounts for foreigners, I believe that, and it's something that is under thoughts from the government officials, is to promote the way and the procedure that properties are being transferred.
Right.
And maybe use technology more than what is currently being used at the moment, which, I mean, the land registries are only working for dead urgent cases due to the outbreak. Right. So this outbreak shall give us some lessons. We hope that there is not a second outbreak, but nobody knows, so we have to be ready.
Yeah, good point.
In all aspects.
Yeah. That's good point, Stefan. All right, another question here. If a person or a legal entity is a party to an agreement and due to the pandemic is unable to comply with their contractual obligations, what are the consequences? Okay, this is a legal question. Since the COVID-19 is a worldwide pandemic, there is no doubt that parties may wish to assess the applicability of force majeure clauses in their contractual arrangements to ascertain the possibility of termination or suspension of performance or any other legal consequences. Now, the question as to whether COVID-19 may be considered to be a force majeure event, that is, enables parties to temporarily, or even, I would dare to say, permanently be excused from performance of their contractual obligations, will depend on the circumstances. The nature and content of the contract in question is the most thing that needs to be taken into consideration. Excuse me. The term force majeure does not have a universally recognized meaning under Cyprus law, and the court will examine the wording. Will examine the wording and the intention of the parties at the time of entry into the contract. In many instances, contracts will include a specific and closed list of events which are said to constitute force majeure, such as act of God, floods, typhoons, governmental or regulatory prohibitions, or whatever. The COVID-19 pandemic is unique, and not only due to its epidemiological, a Greek word by the way, and clinical features, but also because it contains both a naturally occurring component, which is the virus itself, and the government actions components such as the guarantees and travel bans put in place are responsible to the outbreak. Therefore, I have to say that there is no simple answer as to whether COVID-19 will qualify as a force majeure event. This will necessarily depend on several factors, including the nature and the content of the contract and its governing law. Sorry. Now, another question that I can see coming through. Now, which is a very interesting question. Can finance be obtained to complete a project? Someone is asking us here. Yeah, very interesting question. The government has announced that they will guarantee up to 2 billion in bank loans to business and self-employed people. The provisions of these loans aims to cover companies, self-employed persons, working capital and investments. The scheme aims to cover credit risks, encouraging lenders to provide cheap new loans from April 2nd, as it was the announcement, until the end of the year. self-employed persons or corporate companies that possess non-performing loans at the end of 2019 will not be eligible, by the way, just to clarify that. So those that they have non-performing loans, they will not be allowed to claim for such loans. Now, another announcement which was very important on the part of the government, it was that the durations of the loans covered by the scheme will not exceed the 6 years, and the state will guarantee any bank losses sustained up to 6 years only. So this is another very positive step taken by the Cyprus government related with the banking sector as well. And hopefully this as well will benefit the economy in general, and also will help the investors. Now, we are almost, Stefane, 45 minutes on air. Yes, tell me.
Just add something on what you just said. Through my experience as a valuer, even up to today, banks are lending on private individuals for several reasons.
Yes.
House renovations, purchase of cars. So that is good, because without liquidity in the market, there is no recovery. Of course, there are a lot of factors that have to be taken into consideration on the way and who we lend, but facilitating liquidity will help recovery, and that was the belief and the order of the Central Bank of Cyprus towards the commercial banks. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Very good. Right. Okay. We are 46 minutes now on the air, according to my clock here. There is a lot of questions. I'm just going to pick just a last one. Okay. There is one question in relations with the Cyprus investments program and Cyprus investment program in relations with the UK, the Brexit, and eventually how can someone benefit from the Cyprus investment program as UK citizens, basically, or even as a UK worker. Okay, this is a very, very difficult question to answer it now on this one, on this webinar. I will only say that there is an announcement that recently has been made through the discussions about Brexit, that if someone wants to secure a Cypriot passport and be a resident in UK, they need to do that until the 31st of December of 2020. So basically there is a deadline. I will come back to that in more details through an email. Thank you for sending us this question. Okay. Now, Stephanie, do you have any conclusions as we need to end this webinar?
Okay, the conclusion is that for sure, in order to help the situation and hence the recovery of the economy, and this is valid for all countries, not just Cyprus, the only thing we have to do is stay home. So I will take the opportunity to wish you and your families a happy Easter. Stay safe and healthy and stay home.
Very good. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Stefane. Thank you for all being with us at this webinar. It was very pleasure of having you all today under the current circumstances. If I did not get to your questions, I will email you and get you an answer. We had a lot of great interactions and not a lot of time, unfortunately. However, your answers will be on its way, or even, Stefane, another webinar maybe?
Yes, why not?
When things will change again?
I believe tops in 1 month we will have a clearer picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, these are uncertain times, and COVID-19 is clearly impacting our personal and professional lives and those that we love. I wanted to wish you, your loved ones, and fellow colleagues safe passage through this difficult period. Please take care and stay positive. It's a challenging operating under the current restrictions. However, I'm confident that we'll get through this together. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.